Our first speaker for the symposium this morning is Chris Kettering from Boeing Commercial Airplanes. He's the Director of Product Development and Services and Support. His primary responsibility includes managing the commercial aviation services, investment portfolio, and leading services and support product development for the new and derivative commercial and military programs. Kettering's focus has been to improve business performance by matching technology and information innovation with customer-centered development and rigorous program management. Since joining Boeing in 1986, Kettering has held a series of engineering, marketing, and management positions in commercial airplanes, including development of gold care, maintenance, and material service. Prior to rejoining commercial airplanes, he was the Director, Air Traffic Management. As an early member of the 777 team, Kettering was involved in the 777 aerodynamic wing design and wind tunnel testing. He also managed software system development and supported design, build teams, sales campaigns, flight testing, and certification. During 1998, Kettering held a 3-month guest management position at BMW AG in Munich, Germany. In this position, he benchmarked process re-engineering, production development, manufacturing, marketing, and supply management. In 1993, he worked for 5 months at British Airways Flight Operation and Engineering in London, studying all facets of the day-to-day operation of the airline. Kettering holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Aeronautical Engineering from California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, a beautiful campus, by the way, that I've had the pleasure of visiting last year. And so without further ado, I would ask Mr. Kettering to join me on the podium and look forward to his talk.
Thank you,
Chris.
Yeah, appreciate that. Good morning. It's really an honor to represent the Boeing Company here today. And I think it's going to be really fun sharing some of the neat things that we're actually doing as a company. As the bio kind of pointed out, I've been enjoying technology and working on aerospace here in the Puget Sound for coming up on 30 years now. And it's really fun to see the changes that have taken place. Now if we can get... So I thought I would start off with maybe kind of an academic approach to things. So I actually had a minor in English and worked at the college radio station. And so I always try to really understand what do words mean, and I was thinking about what the words mean for today's theme. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Share a little about some of the neat things going on at the Boeing Company, and particularly in the development area. And then I want to just kind of take a pause, and maybe this will help spark some of that dialogue that Roger was mentioning. There are some real challenges, I think, for our industry. I'm calling them impediments here. So let's start with some definition. So accelerating. I mean, these would be what I would characterize as kind of the traditional engineering-centric dimensions, or definitions rather, of the words. But, you know, there's always more definitions. And I think for the purposes of today's conversation, I'd really like to focus on the later ones. Because I think really when we think about acceleration, it's about progress, it's about advancement. And I particularly like the interrelation with life, society, and the environment. Because I really do think that that's why we do technology, is to create cool things, like airplanes, my favorite cool thing. So let's talk a little bit about the industry. We had just a fantastic year last year. You know, 17 order and delivery records. It's a little hard to wrap my head around that. In fact, as I think back, it's not clear that all of those wouldn't be fairly arcane. The leader of our PD team said, yeah, I think one of the records was most airplanes sold in June to a guy named Steve, which is probably accurate. But be that as it may, we're looking for taking credit for a big year. One of the things that I think is brand new for us as a Boeing company, coming out of some of the challenges of recent years, is that pretty much every year is going to be records in terms of deliveries. You know, we've more than doubled or a 50% increase in the employment in Washington State recently, and you've seen large commitments to continue to do more in terms of the brand new 777X wing factory. Delivered the 8,000th 737 last year. That's a hard one. 1500th 747. So some very, very big achievements we're pleased about. I want to talk a little bit about aviation and the way we view aviation, and I think this directly pertains to the kinds of projects that we'd like to have as well. I'm going to share a little bit more data, but aviation has a very bright future. Things are looking good, and we believe that it will continue to grow in spite of temporary downturns that are part of any industry. I think passenger growth, I mean, it's never been cheaper or more easy to fly pretty much anywhere in the world. And a larger demographic of people are participating. And from my humble knothole, that's good for everybody. It's good for our business. I think it's good for global peace in terms of people understanding each other. It's certainly good for global commerce. And the single-aisle airplanes, as I'll share a little bit of data with you, is absolutely the fastest growing part of the marketplace today. Now, there's a couple of other really important trends to understand about commercial aviation. One is that it tends to really correlate with global GDP. So when the world is growing in terms of gross domestic product, we see aviation as coming along with that. For years, there have been scares about, video teleconferencing and the internet. People aren't going to want to get on airplanes. All the data kind of suggests that that's really not the case. The other things are what we call value of service. And to me, think about your scarce resources and how you want to apply your scarce resources. And it turns out that the services that you experience are catering to the way you want to spend your money. And so things like infrastructure and business model, we see this incredible growth in low-cost carriers, the Southwest model, if you will, growing around the globe. We see very much different types of service. There's I'll call them do-everything kinds of carriers. The traditional United States, the Uniteds and the Deltas and the Americans. But you're seeing some incredible growth in areas like the Middle East. It's almost like the world just discovered that the Middle East it's in the middle of everything, and you could use it as a global hub. And of course, there's great support from the local governments for that. And then the last one that I think is important and certainly touches on the relationship here of government to industry and to academia is the regulatory environment. And it's very, very important. We're seeing the world that I grew up in and started my career in. There was kind of the FAA, and much of the world looked to the FAA for guidance. And then the Europeans formed the JAA, and those were kind of the two big guys. Well, it's turning out that China would like to play a role, and Russia would like to play a role. And so we're seeing some fundamental shifts in the regulatory environment that's going to affect our business. I told you I'd share a little bit of data. What you're looking at is revenue passenger kilometers. That's what RPKs are. And so this is one of the metrics that we use to show the growth in air travel. And to me, what's fascinating about this is not so much that it's continuously growing, it's that it's weathered some amazing storms and continued to grow. In fact, even with very minor downturns, we see the recovery happen, I think, much faster than many of us would have thought. And although it's incredibly traumatic as we experience these downturns, the industry as a whole is incredibly resilient, and that's a very positive thing. We do put out something called the Current Market Outlook, and the Current Market Outlook is published about every 2 years, and the purpose is for us to predict what we think is going to happen in air travel. And just so you know, it's out there on the Boeing commercial website, and it's available to everybody. And this shows you the relationship of the main things that we pay attention to. You can see that global GDP, number of passengers flying, airline traffic, and cargo all tend to outpace global GDP. So to me, that says that aviation and commercial transport in particular is one of those engines that's helping fuel that. Some interesting markets. We predict close to 37,000 new airplanes over the next 20 years, 37,000. We think about 26,000 of those are going to be in the single aisle area. So that was the comment earlier about that being the single largest growth area. Although they're the majority of the tails that we'll deliver, they're really only about half of the revenue. And when I say we're going to deliver, I mean the entire industry. So I mean all of the Boeing company and our competitors. So good business to be in. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in development. This is I'll call it mission statement picture on a page for product development. And we like to think of our role is helping revolutionize the future of flight. And that little rondelle in the middle to me is really, really important because Boeing is historically known for fantastic airplanes, groundbreaking airplanes. But groundbreaking airplanes only do well when you consider the other two legs of that three-legged stool, which is the Boeing production system. So I was very pleased to see that some of the projects that have been funded are focused on the production system. And of course, the area that I'm responsible for development, which is the life cycle. And if we don't consider all three of those, we're really not thinking about what's important to the customers. And when I say customers, I'd like you to think about that really broadly. So to me, there are economies that are dependent. There's, of course, the flying public. There's our direct customers that we sell to, leasing companies, in addition to airlines and banks. And really, the way we want to approach that is in a bold, nimble, and disciplined manner. And the environment that we do it in is really these two arrows on the bottom. You'll notice that we have a couple of things called out. We're really talking about how do you use collaboration and how do you use learning faster by doing as a way of accelerating innovation. And you see that in the green around the three main pillars. And I thought that fit really well with our theme today in terms of accelerating technology. I think many people are familiar that fuel is a big deal. And so I like to think of fuel as a surrogate for overall operational efficiency of an airline. It's kind of the single biggest portion. And although we have a lull in the overall price of fuel right now, I think there's most people expecting that it will come back and that's a minor blip. But whether it's 61% or whether it's 48%, it's still huge, and it's still the single largest contributor. And we've used the traditional technologies, I would say, to go after operational efficiency historically. And those are things like structural efficiency and aerodynamic efficiency and propulsive efficiency. I like to think of information as being the next one that we need to start paying attention to. And I'll give you some examples in a couple of charts. But I would like you to just read through some of those other elements. So people turn out to be a big part of the cost. And then the things that happen on the ground, I like to think of those as the things that happen when the airplane is not making money for the airline. The metaphor I like is that the airplane is really a factory. It's a factory that only makes money when it's flying. It's kind of a unique factory in that when it is making money, it's kind of disconnected from the rest of the world, which is one of our opportunities for increasing efficiency. So let's talk a little bit about some of the technical performance measures that help guide our industry. I think many people are probably familiar with the ones around the airplane, but as the guy from Services and Support, I really want to help you look through that lens as well today. So when we think about an overall airplane program, clearly the costs are a big piece. That operational efficiency component that we talked a little bit about, the effect that it has on the environment, and of course how efficient it is for an airline's operation. That's what cash airplane-related operating cost really is. But when we think about the life cycle, we kind of have a different set of metrics that start to become really important. There's still the cost elements, maintenance cost being a great example, but it starts to affect some of those people that you saw on the previous pie chart of operation in terms of training. It starts to affect the things that are on the ground in terms of commonality of ground support equipment, commonality of parts. And then it starts to take into account the way the airline really views that factory. Is it reliable? Is it available? I mean, we consider reliabilities in aviation 99.7 times. So if you do the math, that means kind of once a year or 3 times a year, the airplane doesn't really start. Now, how many people would repurchase a car that 3 times a year you had an issue with? We call it a lemon, quite frankly, but we're very proud of that, and quite frankly, the complexity in our industry leads to that. And there's a lot of things that we do to improve that. We just introduced a brand new technical performance measure that's called operational availability. And so it's meant to really step back and say, what does an airline care about? They want that factory available to them as much as possible because it can't earn money for them when it's sitting on the ground. So you're seeing us flesh out the operational TPMs to help us think really like an airline. And hopefully it'll help you think about technologies that can help airlines. Okay. There is an unprecedented amount of development work taking place at the Boeing Company today. I'm not going to read you through all of these, but it's absolutely staggering to see how much activity we've got. I'll just give you a couple of examples. We list 737 MAX, which we've started building. It's very, very exciting, and later this year, hopefully it'll look like an entire airplane. But those three little words, MAX, there's actually 4 airplane models committed. So although it looks like a whole lot of development activity with all the airplanes on the page, it's even more when you think about the minor models that are associated. And then the areas that we're responsible for in terms of services. And we really are trying to think through the eyes of our customer. And I like to think of our mission as enabling airline success throughout the life cycle. And if we're doing that in a really thoughtful way, then we've earned the right to have them pay us for things beyond the purchase price of the airplane. So that's one of our key focus areas. As an example, on that blue arrow I showed you on the product development mission page, one of the things that it said was ecoDemonstrator. And I think it's just a great example of how we're using a flying demonstrator to help accelerate the implementation of technology. When you put something on an airplane and make it safe to fly, you're absolutely thinking through things that you would not typically think through as part of the development process. And really, just to be honest with you, one of the challenges we had on the 787 was that we introduced so much technology on one product. So we really want to accelerate the innovation into existing products on a much more regular basis than waiting for the implementation of a brand new product platform. So it's about learning by doing. It's about accelerating innovation, leveraging collaboration, and probably the most exciting thing is there's something about things that fly that really capture our imagination. And so these eco-demonstrators have done a fantastic job. The partnering has taken place with many other companies, but also with key elements of our government, so the FAA and NASA. I just want to kind of give you a quick look at what we've done, and I can't talk too much about the future because until we've actually defined that, we tend not to make it public. But you can see on the page here the airlines that we've worked with and the key governmental agencies and the major technologies that we've been focused on. And so the trick here is it really takes multiple groups to bring new technologies to market. And so going just a little deeper, we'll talk about the 2012 ecoDemonstrator. And that little picture on your left there is one of the trade periodicals. And I don't know how many of you as kids wanted to be a rock star, but I kind of thought that would have been cool. But about as close as we get in commercial aviation is to get your cover, right? Picture on the cover. It was not the Rolling Stone in this case, but it's Aviation Week. And we've had the pleasure of actually doing that twice. And I think what's really compelling about this is that we're implementing technologies in a wide range of areas, everything from fuel cells to vibration damping in the cabin, to looking at things like natural laminar flow winglets that directly led to the MAX winglet. So using the technology demonstrator as a vehicle for accelerating technology. The other thing that I have to point out on these is you see flight trajectory optimization and information. That's where we're really starting to use the information as an efficiency enabler. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. We have services that proactively send messages to the flight deck while the airplane is flying. So think of these as real-time services that evaluate where the airplane is, where it's scheduled to go, and whether there might be a benefit in requesting from air traffic controller a direct route. So instead of flying the pre-planned, if they can save a minimum of a minute and a half, we will proactively say, you should request this. It's absolutely up to the pilot to choose to do that or not to do that. But what we routinely see, savings, 200, 300, 400 pounds of fuel, a couple minutes of time. But you do that in a very large network, and you start adding up really, really big numbers in terms of overall operational efficiency. The other real-time service that we've just implemented, and by the way, we do these not just for Boeing airplanes, we do these for all airplanes. So these are fleet agnostic solutions. It's something called wind updates. So typically when an airplane trip is planned, it'll happen 12 to 18 hours before the pilots actually show up and start to initiate the flight. Well, the weather predictions are 12 to 18 hours old. So there's an opportunity to have a more accurate and more efficient flight if you update the winds. And so we do that. We actually can proactively push wind database to the flight deck of the airplane, and the pilots can choose to accept it or not. When they accept it, they now will fly a more optimum trajectory than they would have before. So that's technology, information, making airplanes more efficient. We were rock stars again in 2014, so another cover. In this case, it's the 787. I'm afraid the bar is kind of being raised for the team, because now if you don't get the cover, it's not going to be good for that program manager. I'll have to think about what's next. But you see here again, a wide range of things in terms of sensors, biodiesel. I noticed that's been looked at here. Taking technologies that have been available for years, GBAS being an example, and actually applying it. I think we're about ready to see that one take off in terms of terminal operations and landing capability. Here's another example of information helping you when we talk about terminal spacing. So this is helping airplanes space more efficiently as they come into the airport. So just a couple examples of how some of these pieces fit together. I did want to leave you with just a couple of thoughts of where are our problems as an industry. What we're looking at here is the number of months on the vertical axis, and the horizontal axis is kind of a surrogate for complexity of products. And we've got a couple of industries here. We've got automobiles and integrated circuits and aerospace. And what's really fascinating is that people in other industries have found a way to deal with complexity without drastically increasing the cost. But in aerospace, we have not. And so what we see is that our costs continue to go up. And I'll be honest with you, that's a real challenge for us. There is demand for more airplanes out there than we can afford to design and build and bring to market. And so that's a real opportunity space. Anybody that follows the automobile industry, one of the things that you've seen in the last decade is really an explosion of automobile models. And the way they were able to do that is because of the downward slope of this curve. They found ways to utilize technology in a way that allows more product to come to market. I would love to see that. So if you can think through in the kind of projects that you're looking at, how we can handle and deal with this conundrum, that would be super, super powerful. So that's a technology view. The other view is people. So the reality for the Boeing company is that in the next 5 years, over half of our workforce, half the workforce, will be eligible to retire. Now, that doesn't mean they're all going to retire, but it means they're eligible to retire. This graph that I'm showing you here actually comes out of Aviation Week, and the demographic at Boeing is very, very similar to this. But what it's showing you is that there's a huge bunching of people in terms of years. So that's number of people in thousands and their age. So there's this huge demographic bubble. Now, I'm part of that demographic bubble, and so I'm not going to work forever. But to me, what this says is we've both got a huge problem. We've got a huge problem in terms of knowledge management. We've got a huge problem in terms of transitioning all those lessons learned. But it's a huge opportunity. I mean, if I were a young person thinking about a career, this goes back to the STEM opportunities. Engineering, there's just a huge need out there. It's fantastic. I mean, really, really great opportunities. The other dimensions that I think are really important to think through is that we are underrepresented when we think about the population as a whole, particularly gender. So attracting more women is going to be a huge opportunity for us. And then global. I mean, our business is absolutely global. I think something between 2/3 and 3/4 of all of our deliveries go outside the United States. And there's an incredibly strong pull to have us do business globally. One of the things that we talk about inside the company is Boeing a global company or is Boeing an American company that does business globally? And I think it's absolutely the latter today. But the opportunity for us is really to move out and design and build probably outside the United States. So the opportunity isn't just here. But here in Washington, the opportunities are just incredible. I mean, what I told you earlier in terms of the increased employment, as we continue to go up in rate to meet the demand, you will continue to see employment go up here in the Puget Sound and in Washington. Okay, so just to kind of wrap things up, the things we're really focused on, and maybe as you think about projects, you could think about how you could help here, is build on the technology successes that we've had. The 787 is a breakthrough airplane. 747-8, same thing, brand new wing. We're going to see more of that. The 737 MAX is going to be a dynamite airplane for our customers. Very, very efficient. But in order for us to be efficient and effective and to work on that cost curve that I showed you, we really need to work on things that can reduce the costs. And when we talk about rate enablers, that means when we go to higher and higher production rates. We've already announced production rate increases for the 737 as an example. And I think there was a really good article that you may have seen in the Seattle Times, those of you that are local, talking about the Renton factory where we actually build the 737. And it is an amazing place if you ever get a chance to actually visit. We're looking for enduring technological architecture. So one of the ways the integrated circuits and the automobiles have helped break that cost curve conundrum is they've gotten more consistent architectures, and they don't change the entire architecture each time. They only change pieces of that, which allows them to accelerate the implementation of technology and reduce the risk at the same time, and that's what we're focused on. And when we think about technology, we really want to think about all three legs of the stool. So we really want to think about ones that you can apply to the airplane, but the production system and the aftermarket are as important to the industry as a whole. And then clearly we're going to be working on those together. Now, I don't know if we have time, but I'm certainly open to any questions, and I think they're fun if there are any.